The sound of the slap cut through the room like a rifle crack, slicing the Thanksgiving air in two. One moment, the clinking of silverware and polite murmurs filled the dining room. The next, silence swallowed everything. My daughter's head snapped to the side, her hair tumbling forward to hide the fresh red mark blooming on her cheek. She blinked quickly, caught between tears and the impossible task of keeping them in. No one moved. Some stared wide-eyed. Others looked down at their plates. A few wore faint, smug smirks. And then there was him, my stepdaughter's husband, Ethan Callahan, standing with his hands still raised, his chest rising and falling as if the violence had been nothing more than a natural exhale. "Do not ever embarrass me like that again," he said, each word dipped in poison. His family didn't flinch. They sat there as though this was just an awkward lull in conversation, not the public humiliation and assault of a woman they supposedly loved. I sat at the far end of the table, every muscle still but alert. My name is Colonel Diane Mercer, 60 years old, retired after 35 years in the U.S. Army. I've seen men crack under enemy fire. I've watched leaders crumble when the weight of battle pressed too hard. But what I saw in Ethan's eyes wasn't chaos or panic. It was the cold, calculated dominance of a man who knew exactly how much control he held and believed no one would challenge it. Rachel is my only daughter. I raised her to be kind, strong, and unafraid to stand tall. Yet here she sat, smaller than I'd ever seen her, shrinking beneath the hand of a man who swore to protect her. And here I was, watching. Not because I couldn't act, but because for 2 months, I had been preparing for this very moment. Ethan's mistake that night wasn't in losing his temper. It was in forgetting exactly who his stepmother-in-law was. He forgot that I had commanded battalions, faced down armed enemies, and never once backed away from a fight when family was at stake. He didn't know that I had already been gathering evidence against him, piece by incriminating piece. What was happening at that table wasn't the beginning of a battle. It was the climax of an operation I'd been running quietly, patiently, and with military precision. I'd seen the signs long before, the bruises explained away as clumsiness, the subtle tension in Rachel's body when he entered a room, the way she stood just behind him in photos like she was afraid of being in full view. In my world, we have a saying, the most dangerous enemy isn't the one charging toward you with weapons drawn, it's the one who waits, watches, and strikes when you're most vulnerable. Ethan thought he was that enemy. That night, he was about to learn he'd picked the wrong opponent. The decision to take Ethan down hadn't been made in the heat of the slap. It had been made weeks earlier, one rainy Tuesday evening when I stopped by Rachel's house unannounced. I'd brought a casserole, a friendly excuse, but through the front window, I saw her frozen in place, Ethan leaning over her with that same squared shoulder posture I'd seen in too many aggressors. His hands moved sharply, his face inches from hers. Then, the flinch. When she opened the door, she wore a smile like armor, and Ethan had already vanished upstairs. But on her forearm, I spotted the faint outline of fingers, the kind of mark that doesn't come from a stumble into furniture. That was the moment I knew feelings alone wouldn't win this. Facts would. The very next day, I went to a small security store run by a retired Marine. I walked out with 3 covert cameras, one disguised as a picture frame, one as a smoke detector, and one small enough to disappear into a bookshelf corner. I also bought an audio recorder no bigger than a thumb drive. Motion activated, date stamped, and easy to hide. The kind of surveillance you could drop into a room without a soul suspecting. My next, housewarming visit to Rachel's place was my first drop. The picture frame went on the mantel. The smoke detector in the hallway. the tiny bookshelf device tucked neatly between two hardcovers. She thanked me for the thoughtful gifts, unaware they were part of a plan that would change her life. Over the next 6 weeks, I collected hours of footage. Ethan's voice raised over a dinner served late, his shoulder slamming into hers in the hallway, his fingers clamping around her wrist until she pulled back in pain. I saved every file twice, once on an encrypted hard drive in my home and once in cloud storage. I didn't tell Rachel. Survivors sometimes defend their abusers until they feel truly safe. This operation wasn't about hope, it was about undeniable truth. Then came the invitation. Ethan called me himself, all fake politeness, to ask if I'd join them for Thanksgiving dinner. It wasn't a request, it was a performance. That's when I reached out to Captain Laura Jennings, an old friend from my army days now working in the military legal system. I told her everything. She didn't hesitate. She'd be there, paperwork in hand, ready to execute a protective order on the spot. When Thanksgiving night arrived, I came early. Years in uniform taught me to assess a room in seconds, angles, exits, sightlines. I took my mental notes and waited. The cruelty started early, barbed jokes from Ethan's mother, digs from his sister. Each remark was meant to chip away at Rachel in plain sight. I stayed silent, eyes on Laura, who gave the slightest nod. She was ready. Then Rachel said it, a quiet statement about respect that stopped the table cold. Ethan turned toward her, slow, deliberate, and then the slap. I stood, calm but steady. "Ethan," I said evenly, "sit down." He snarled, "This is between me and my wife." "No," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. "This is between you and the evidence I've been collecting for the past 2 months." With one tap, the room filled with the sound of his own voice, harsh, threatening, as video footage played of him shoving Rachel against a wall. Gasps broke the silence. "That's one of 27 videos," I told him. "All backed up. All already in the hands of law enforcement." Laura rose, document in hand. "Ethan Callahan, this is an emergency protective order. You will vacate these premises immediately." And just like that, the control he had wielded for years began to crumble in front of everyone he thought would protect him. Ethan's jaw tightened, but the fight had drained from his eyes. His mother muttered about handling this privately, but I cut her off. Privately is how this went on for so long. Privately is why Rachel's been living in fear. Laura's voice remained steady. "You have a choice, Mr. Callahan. Leave on your own, or be escorted." He glared at me, then at Rachel, but the dominance was gone. It was the look of a man who knew the walls were closing in. He grabbed his coat, stomped toward the door, and left without another word. The slam echoed like a closing chapter. Rachel's breathing was shaky, but for the first time in months, her shoulders weren't hunched. I leaned in and said softly, "It's over. You're safe now." But I knew safety wasn't just about removing a threat. It was about rebuilding what had been broken. That night, Rachel came home with me. She packed an overnight bag like she was expecting him to reappear at any moment. I carried the rest. Every zip of a suitcase felt like releasing months of trapped air. The first few days were quiet. She moved between the bedroom and the kitchen, unsure what to do without waiting for permission. I didn't press her. I knew from my years in uniform that after a firefight, soldiers need time for their minds to catch up with their bodies. Survivors of domestic battles are no different. Within a week, Laura confirmed the protective order had been extended. Rachel was granted sole use of the house until the divorce was finalized. Ethan faced charges of domestic assault and harassment, with bail conditions keeping him miles away. Our evidence was airtight, and the slap at Thanksgiving had given us a room full of live witnesses. In court, his lawyer tried to twist the recordings into misunderstandings and marital disagreements. The judge didn't buy it. Ethan was convicted on 2 misdemeanors and 1 felony for aggravated assault. He got probation, mandatory counseling, and a 5-year no-contact order. Rachel sold the house, said it didn't feel like home anymore, only like a building full of echoes. With the settlement and her share of the sale, she rented a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. She started teaching again, taking part-time work at a local art studio. Slowly, the light came back into her eyes. One evening over coffee in her new kitchen, she said, "If you hadn't been there that night," her voice trailed off. I covered her hand with mine. "Rachel, I was always going to be there. The only difference is, that night, I made sure everyone saw the truth at the same time." She smiled, a real smile, and I knew the mission had been worth every second. To anyone watching this who sees the signs in someone they love, believe them. Watch closely. Gather the truth. And when the moment comes, stand beside them with everything you have. Real protection isn't just about shielding someone from harm. It's about dismantling the source so it can never rise again.